Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Nathan Boyd, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraftsman Jordan Lewis. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr. Tom Wilson, President of the Space Program's Northrop Grumman, United States of America, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance of the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who gave their lives for us in war and in operation for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Charles Edward Grimshaw. Charles Grimshaw, known as Charlie, was born in Bourke, New South Wales, around 1878. At some point, he moved to Canberra, where his father worked as a carpenter. Charlie went on to work as a labourer on Nunamar and Nunamee stations, where he gained considerable experience working with sheep. He was well known in the Canberra district, described as an upright and honourable man, one of those men who, recognising a duty, do it without ostentation. Charlie Grimshaw enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in October 1914, just weeks after the outbreak of war. He underwent a brief period of training in Australia before leaving for active service overseas with the 7th Light Horse Regiment. The 7th Light Horse sailed from Sydney in late December 1914, arriving in Egypt in early February. The men spent several weeks training in the desert, seeing the infantry leave on their way to the landing on Gallipoli in April 1915. Initially considered unsuitable for operations on Gallipoli, the Light Horse were soon deployed without their horses to reinforce a depleted infantry. The 7th Light Horse held a sector of the line on the far right on the Anzac perimeter for most of their time on the peninsula. Although largely engaged in defensive work on Gallipoli, the men of the 7th Light Horse were exposed to the dangers of artillery and rifle fire. Dugouts were cut into the sides of the hills and trenches to provide shelter from stray bullets. On the 1st of June 1915, Trooper Charlie Grimshaw went to sleep in his dugout as normal, but failed to appear the next morning. When his mates went to see what had happened, they found that his dugout had collapsed on him overnight, suffocating Charlie Grimshaw under a load of fallen earth. Grimshaw was buried near where he died, his mates singing, "Nearer, my God, to thee," as they laid their comrade to rest. He was 37 years old. Lieutenant Colonel Arnott, the officer commanding the 7th Light Horse Regiment, wrote to Charlie's family to tell them what had happened. He wrote, "Trooper Grimshaw was a good soldier. He died serving his country as truly if he had been shot in action." In Canberra, a requiem mass for Charles Grimshaw was held at St. Edward's Church. Locals travelled to be part of the large congregation. During the service, Father Doran said, "Charles Grimshaw's great sacrifice teaches us all a great lesson of unselfishness. He sacrificed his life at the call of duty, not as the rich, worldly fighting for his own cherished possession of land, stock, or money, but bravely for a principle, the principle of right as against might." A few months later, Staff Sergeant Keat, still on Gallipoli, received a clipping of the newspaper article about the Requiem Mass for Charlie Grimshaw. He wrote, "Poor fellow, I pass his grave every time I go to the beach, and as a rule, that is once a day." His troop was greatly cut up at losing such a fine fellow. Today, Trooper Charlie Grimshaw's remains lie in Shrapnel Valley Cemetery on Gallipoli among more than 680 Commonwealth soldiers. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Charles Edward Grimshaw, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.